I was thinking, after seeing some video about some, I don't know who it was, saying that, all the violence that's happening around the country, well, violence, vandalism and stuff, that people just running into shops because lawmakers thought, well, we don't need laws, it's just clogging up the court system. People should be able to steal up to $700 and then, what is that, like grand larceny? And they should be able to steal up to that much and get away with it. And so now people are running in there in mobs, apparently flash mobs, organized flash mobs or whatever, and stealing, but because government has basically said it's okay to rob stores. So what should happen is all these store owners or anybody that's had a crime committed against them should never have to pay taxes again, since the government has let them down. Basically said it's okay. These store owners should never have to pay a sales tax again. They should have a special sign on their building that says no need to pay sales tax here, and that would end the politicians making money on it. Can you imagine how many stores that have been robbed? That if that was put into effect, how much money politicians would lose? Because if you think about it, the people don't make any money on the taxes they get. Because these politicians, they do everything for popularity, votes, and everything else. They don't do anything for the people. They say they are, but they're so out of touch with what people are. It's like they got all these laws protecting themselves from ever being prosecuted for anything. It's basically they can break the law and it means nothing. They can break the law. The politicians can. They've made laws to where you can't prosecute them. It takes 2/3 to do anything to a politician. It takes 2/3 of like the Congress or whoever to vote them out of office. People can't do anything. And they can't be prosecuted. It has to be brought up like that, and that's their way of, it takes 2/3, and if they're the majority and one of their own party does something wrong, it takes 2/3 of the majority to vote that person out. And I've never heard of it. I've never heard of any of them being voted out, and yet look at all the crimes they've committed. And I'm guessing this was put into effect. That kind of law was put into effect when they first started talking. People went forward and said, okay, people gathered around, and maybe, a small community gathering talked up what they wanted. Maybe the government in their area was like really, I don't know if the word's desperate. I don't know if that's the right word or not. But, the community was really let down by the community, by the leaders or whatever was in place at the time. So the people gathered together and came up with a bunch of guidelines. They wanted how the town to be run, or they wanted something changed. And then instead of looking, they couldn't, they probably didn't have freedom of speech, so they couldn't go in a riot. So they put somebody, maybe a respectable person, in charge, that the government at the time would allow to speak to them. Maybe he was affluent or something like that, or he or she or whatever. And the people said, we won't, we'll back anything you say, and we'll protect you. And instead of being a mob going up there, looking like a mob, this one person to go in there and say, yeah, well, I'm speaking for the people. And, and if one person goes forward to speak to like a community of politicians or whatever it would be at the time, maybe it was 5 or 6 politicians running the county or whatever, maybe somebody was, they was all in charge, and they'd have like a meeting. I don't know how it was back in the day, but so the people somehow came up with a way that said, you should, we won't, how would they say that? It was like, the laws that protect the politicians now that are in power is what the people said is how they would protect the people. So basically, what they're using now was used back then for the individual person that was speaking actually for the community, that the community like voted in or whatever. But it wasn't a politician. They was just going up to speak. And they said, we'll give you this kind of immunity. Maybe they said, we'll, if you ever brought up on charges, then we'll go as a community and block them from persecuting you and threaten them as a community. We'll threaten them as a mob, you know, by saying we put this person up, and it was it was all of us, and so that, you know, maybe that was protected. So now these people that walk forward became politicians, and they kept those rules. Now those rules still protect them, but now they've turned onto the community, not onto the community. They turned against the community, basically. They'll still talk for your votes, but behind your back they're going to do all these squirrely things that nobody wants done, or everybody questions why are they doing this, and they're doing it for political clout and all the stuff. But they're using that protection that they was put up when they were with the people, and now they aren't with the people. They're with the government that they went up against. So I think all those rules that the government protects themselves with should be stricken from law in protecting them, and they should be seeing as they're not speaking for the people. They might have been elected, but they're not speaking for a group of people, because they're basically agenda and popularity. You know, they're forwarded by their popularity or their want of popularity for more votes. They're just doing it. They're not doing it for the community. They're doing it for something that's going to bring them votes or popularity, or, you know, adornment, and maybe in a bigger community so they can step up. But they're not doing it for community. They're not that person saying, okay, I'm going to take a chance of, you know, going up against, you know, the government with your wants and needs, and I'm going to, you know, and that back then it was probably, you know, they might have taken them out and shot them for treason or something, just for asking what the community wants. So they was taking a chance. Nowadays, that protection is the same people. It's like creating a king in a land of lawlessness, creating a king and saying, well, this is how we'll protect you, and then they become a king. You know, this is before they're a king. They're just we'll let you hold the rules, you know, and you'll be the rule keeper of what we come up with. And then they become this king, and they step up in power, and they create this guard. They create an army and everything else, and the people no longer have access, and the people have become the enemy. People that protected them have then become the enemy. So that's what's going on in society now. It's they've forgotten where government was created for and how it was created. Of course, there's I'm guessing way back in time before there was government, that people congregated together. If there was one village that wanted somehow found power, somehow they, you know, whether Neanderthal or Neolithic, whatever it was, it started creating kingdoms, and, well, not necessarily kingdoms, but an organized people with, like, say, a militia. When, like, militias and armies were first, you know, when they first had conflict, instead of people just passing by, you know, two cavemen passing by, it was like groups of cavemen passing by, and they used to probably just do this, and then they realized that, well, these people were going to the same place we hunted, and there's not that much whatever, or they're gathering the same strawberries that we were gathering, and if they gather more strawberries, then we won't have any for tomorrow, so we're going to starve. And they've noticed this over, you know, years and years, and they didn't write anything down. But so in time, there was a village that there was a guy in charge, somehow became in charge of this village, which was, you know, maybe he was the strongest, and he guarded the coffer of berries or hides or meat or whatever that the other villagers gathered. After a while, they found out that he was the strongest, and maybe he passed on his hunting skills to others. Maybe he was a teacher of hunting skills or whatever. And so he stayed behind because, you know, maybe he was getting too old, maybe got arthritic or whatever back then. And he couldn't, but he could still guard like the stock pile of whatever they were stockpiling. And he decided, somewhere along the line, he decided that maybe he walked to another village. He knew another village, you know, and just sat outside their village and seen how much, you know, comparing their intake to his intake. Maybe they were a close village and they was like, well, we need to do something about these people. Maybe their village was growing bigger because they were gathering more food or whatever. And this village started teaching hunting, thought, well, we need to do something. So they created, within their village, they had people go out, and maybe they were outlaws at the time. What I'm considering outlaws is somebody that was no longer part of the village. Maybe they was, I don't know, stealing from the stock or using hides that they never helped. You know, maybe you had to be a contributor to the village to exist within the village. Otherwise, you were pushed out or outlawed. Means you had to no longer have access to the good or the whatever the village brought in. So therefore, you had to live outside of the village and not be allowed the food and the whatever, you know, skins or whatever it is they used in the housing. So at night you would go in, and then after, you know, at night you'd go in and steal, rape, whatever it was they did, you know, whatever they did to get back at the village for pushing them out and making them starve. And then this happened over time, maybe, you know, go thousands or 10,000 years, and people gathered outside the village and formed bands. Okay, so maybe one of the people that realized this outlaw band was good at what they did, he went out and said, you know, I'm going to do something for you. And I might give you some food or whatever like that, or some help. You know, they might not have needed it, but they thought, here's some free stuff we're going to get from the village. And it's maybe it's a little better prepared. You know, maybe they were better at skins or whatever. So these outlaws said, okay, what do you want us to do? And they said, we want you to disrupt this village over there by stealing from them. Instead of stealing from us, we'll give you some stuff, but we want you to do stuff for us. And this is where criminals first align themselves with the government. So these criminals, these outlaws, went over to another village, maybe multiple villages, started stealing from them, and this king of this one village said, hey, we want you to steal so much that these people are going to need protection. And then, but before you do that, we want to go around and tell them, you know, it might have started, he went around to the first village and said, hey, there's some people been robbing us. You might want to look out for them. And the village said they didn't, you know, we don't know what you're talking about, stealing, whatever. And so this king sicked he wasn't a king, it was just whatever this tribe was. And he was the one, might not even been a leader, might have been the head idea guy, whatever. So he had these outlaws go in there and steal as much as they could, you know, over a period of time. And then this king or whatever, this village leader would go back over there and take some of his hunters and say, we could protect your village for a certain amount of your goods. Say if you turn over so many hides or so many arrows or spear points or whatever it was to us, that we'll protect you with that. Or maybe give us some of your women and whatever they used at the time to barter, you know. And so this village said, yeah, but how do we know? And then these hunters were real good at, you know, hunting, and they showed, it was possibly the first Olympics where they were put up against, well, where's your hunters at? And we'll show you how good our hunters are compared to your hunters. Then they had maybe a spear throwing contest or whatever. Not saying it happened, not saying it didn't. And so this leader of this one village that put the outlaws against the other village won with this hunters showing better skills than the village. And so the village said, okay, we'll give you some hides and some women and some spear points or whatever. And then so that they went back and they decided, well, they're going to do this to more villages. And so after a while, they went around had the outlaws do this to more villages so they could gather more stuff, and it caused them to not hardly have to work, and they just become a military instead of protecting the villages. They go around protecting it, and then that leader would tell the outlaws, okay, don't rob this village anymore, and because we're protecting it now, and here's some whatever to give. Then after a while, the outlaws ran out of places to rob, and all they were getting was a small amount of goods from the one village for helping them conquer all these other villages with what they claimed as guarding these villages. So this one village, which was created in its first government, was actually outlaws using outlaws to do their biting. Yeah, almost like Biden. Their bidding. And then the outlaws side, well, we can't do this anymore because we're not making enough on this one village. You need to give us more. And the leader of the village said, no, you're only getting what I told you you'd get. So he said, well, that's not enough. We need more. And so maybe they started talking or something, and then that leader of that village said, okay, we're going to make a rule that these people are, maybe the other villages didn't know that these outlaws had band together, and maybe these outlaws didn't even know about these other villages. And so these outlaws went around to these villages and maybe they didn't communicate the same way or something, whatever, and went around and tried to tell these villages that, hey, it's we were told to rob you so they could have control of your village. And so the next time the king went over to collect some I don't know, whatever not spoils, but whatever they call treasure to certain people, like Vikings collected it from kings when they said we wouldn't loot your town if you gave us a certain amount of treasure. But anyway, whatever it was. So this village said, hey, we don't want to give it to you. These outlaws came by, and so the leader, I don't know whether he was taken aback and had to figure out a way. He said, okay, that's fine. Maybe he said, that's fine. You don't have to do that anymore. And so these outlaws are ruining it for this village. So all these villages quit paying. And so this king or whatever, the leader of this one village, went around to the others and asked if they were still being robbed. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. Maybe these outlaws found out about these other villages through that one leader. He sold all these other villages out. Maybe they were protected and not known about. So now all these outlaws know about everything else because of this one village. So now, whether they were robbing or not, that's basically, I'm believing that's the beginning of government, is how this leader controlled outlaws. And that's why outlaws, one is organized crime and one is disorganized crime, or that's what they claim. Only the organized crime is the government, and the disorganized crime, which outsmarts the government from time to time by going around and telling the villages that they were put up to rob the village by this other village that was supposedly helping them. And so that's where crime and government coexist in the criminal world. Now they're giving criminals, how does the government how is the government helping people by allowing criminals to steal from small businesses, and even these larger department stores? That's funny. These small businesses, like what was it, fruit stands? Isn't that where they were first starting out? Because people, well, I had to feed my family, and so the public said, well, that one person, he was, he didn't have a job and he had a family, so he stole a couple apples, and now he's doing 7 years for stealing a couple apples to feed his family. And so the public said, "Wow, that's an outrage." You know, the guy's trying to find a job, trying to feed his family, and this, that, and the other. And so now it's compiled itself into this government allowing people, because they think, well, these people are poor, and these businesses, which, you know, during the pandemic, you know, trying to get back into business, and these people just destroying their businesses. You know, insurance ain't cheap. Who knows what their, you know, their stuff was, you know, like these, you know, they started at fruit stands, and then they started going up to what, iPhones, and now they're robbing jewelry stores. So this is not to feed their family. And even if it was, you know, the government, there's government programs, you know, which we pay taxes for. And the government came up to pay taxes to all these people that couldn't eat. Instead of saying quit breeding, they gave them more money for more kids. So it's the government is basically indulging criminals to commit crime. And it's the public is just now realizing that after decades of this happening to small businesses. And it's funny now that they're saying, well, maybe we got to do something, because it's not hitting the guy in the fruit market who's having stuff stolen from him, because people think, oh, it's only apples. Oh, it's only this. But if they were hit, you know, $700 by a group of people every week, they're losing $700 per person by however many people came through their fruit stand. You know, I mean, how many people went broke, or it caused their business to really suffer to get, just because they had food or whatever necessities for people to exist on, until these criminals start heading to the jewelry stores. And I mean, now they're in jewelry store, and everybody's saying, oh no, we can't allow that. You know, these rich people selling diamonds, selling rocks and stuff, making millions and billions of dollars in the industry, compared to a guy who has a family-based business, fruit stand or whatever, trying to make day-to-day on people buying fruit. But now that everybody's getting all upset because diamonds or stuff are being stolen out of large department stores. They didn't say anything about people losing their, you know, money in their family business. It's when these, you know, these elitists start getting robbed from. Why would people start to take notice then? Why? Wow, this is out of control. You know, and that's how the elitists are protected, by people saying, well, it doesn't matter if, you know, this small apple salesman, you know, he's getting robbed, and whatever profit he had, you know, and he's probably got a landlord trying to jack the price up on his rent, and his insurance is going up because people are stealing from his stock. So now, you know, but now these people that are probably have scammed the industry and insurance for loss in diamonds, maybe in transport or whatever. They've had robberies planned against their own transporters, and possibly killing some just to make money on insurance, and they still got the diamonds because whoever they were in cahoots with that stole the diamonds possibly gave them, you know, partial diamonds to sell maybe on the black, whatever, you know. There is no such thing as it's like all business has criminal, it's almost all business has criminal intent when it gets to a certain size. Even some small business, there's some families, you know, and that think, well, we can just charge, you know, they don't put prices on stuff, and then you get up the counter and it's like, wow, that's an outrageous price for something. And some people buy it and some people don't. But that's what I'm saying is all this stuff it's like planned events. And if people didn't have to pay taxes that had crimes committed against them, you know, if they reported a crime, and the guy, I mean, look at how many crimes are committed, and they're saying, you know, well, this guy's saying, well, these police could catch every criminal that's doing this. How come there's so many crimes that have been committed that haven't been solved? And they're saying they can, and they always go against the easiest criminals. Police, you know, that's what's been found, is they don't go against hardened criminals that know the ins and outs of all the way the law policies and how stuff is done. You know, they're basically criminally insane to the knowledge of government workings and how they can scoot around the law and remain a criminal. And you see in that big time in like Mexico, where, you know, drug cartel is taking control of the government. You got Democrats pushing communism, which has nothing to do with our Constitution or the Bill of Rights. And it's like, why are they pushing this? I'll tell you why. There's some criminal intent. The criminal intent is they're going to make more money on taxes, do less and make more. And that's what they put forth, is the less you do, the more you make. And if you can accomplish that and be acknowledged as being able to do less and make more, then you're rewarded. There's no hard work anymore making it from hard work. It's the less you do, the more you make, the more you're rewarded. It's this, everything is, they're losing context of what this country was built on is hard work, and that's why these people don't want to work anymore. It's not from the them getting paid. It's from the whole realization that the less you do, the more you should be, the more you make. And hard work has become something that nobody wants tied to. It's like, well, hard work is for slaves, and we've obliterated slavery. We've abolished slavery in this country. Except you haven't, have you? It's just motivated into, it's been motivated into class divide, is basically what it is. You're not slaves if you're making money, even though it's minimum wage. That's the new slavery. Minimum wage is the new slavery. This class divide, which is, you know, it's been through the ages. Even, you know, class divide was around. It's been like that since, you know, white people in European countries were made peasants and basically had to work, you know, given a land which wasn't really theirs. They could be taken any time. Food stock could be taken at any time by the king if they were needed. The family could starve, and they'd be pushed out if they couldn't produce of their lot, say growing whatever, you know, potatoes or whatever. If they couldn't grow them and it was a bad year, they'd be punished and they'd be kicked off their land, and somebody else would be forced. And so it was basically, you would be working for something you couldn't control. It was no different. And before that, the battle, you know, battle slaves in wars and stuff, you know, there were slaves. But I'm not even talking about that. We're talking, you know, it's been upgraded. Slavery has been upgraded to class divide and poverty and all this, and minimum wage. It's just to change the name, just like they're going to turn this country communist, but it's not going to be called communist. They're still going to be they're going to claim all the freedoms. They might try to knock a couple out of the Bill of Rights so that they can control taxes, not have to do, you know, cut down on law enforcement, and just make certain stuff a non-crime, which is what they've done now. This is what people are allowing this country to be turned into, because they think, well, my kids will take care of it. And that's what they do. Everybody's passing the buck. They don't think, well, we're bringing kids in and this country is going to hell in a handbasket. But it's not really. It's everybody's saying, well, this is outrageous. This should be happening. Well, it happens all the time. It's happened before this stuff happened. And it's like everything else. Statistics are brought up that nobody ever thought about. Crimes are brought up. Storms are brought up that they're just now they report on. They might say, well, this, you know, India's always been flooding. Ever since I remember, they've shown flooding in India ever since I've been alive. And it's always flooded, and it's always the same area, and they keep rebuilding it. I'm thinking they're showing the same stuff in India as they do, and they used to have they used to show the Moscow bread lines. They had one film of a Moscow bread line where you could practically name the people and what they were doing when they showed it. It's nothing new. It was just one bread line they showed. When they said, look at this bread line, it was probably 30 people. I've seen more people waiting in line for a movie. But, well, the movies were different. You can not go to a movie and not start. Well, what if you were living on popcorn? Anyway. So, I don't know. Maybe I've just you know, what is the effect with the citizenry should have? Well, we should make up our own rules of what we want done. You know, it's almost like we need two governments. One is for the citizens, which the government in control used to be when they spoke against England. They were speaking against England. Of course, it might have been they were speaking for corporations that were growing, but people having to pay taxes, and the tax was probably more than the purchase. You know, if they were buying bread or something and they had to pay, I'm not sure what. I haven't really looked into the prices people were having to pay when prior to the Revolution, the American Revolution. That would be an interesting subject to talk about. What the citizenry had, you know, because there was they said there was more loyalists, which were loyal to England, and there was only 3% of the people that actually stood up against the British in the American Revolutionary War. And that's why they call these people the 3%ers, because there's only 3% of the people stood up against them and fought in that war. There was like 8,000 deaths in the Revolutionary War or something like that. And there was only like 3% of the population that fought against Britain. And the rest were loyalists, and that would do nothing to help the people become anything. And you can still see it. It's almost like these Democrats are loyalists to another government. I mean, look at them. They're trying to push communism. So I'm guessing the Democrats, if you're a Democrat, then you're more likely a loyalist. And since Democrats were what, before the Civil War? I'm not sure when Democrats started. I don't know. I know the South started with Democrats. I don't know why there was only one party. If the country was, what it was, Democrats and Independents. I don't know. I'm not really that big on. I hate politics and government, because as far as I'm concerned, they're just organized crime, and that's where I sit at. I look at them, and I wouldn't vote any of these people in, because you know what they're like. I mean, anybody with millions and millions of dollars being able to be gathered just to become a politician or a leader. It's like that's what it takes to have a good idea. And none of these people solve any problems. They have somebody else, you know, they'll pick somebody out of the populace, the citizenry, they have a good idea or this, that, and the other, and then they'll use the idea, put it into one of their committees or whatever it is. Not even a committee, but they got, what do they got? Departments. They got all the. I mean, how many departments does the government have? And they try to make the president. You know, president is basically a spokesperson for the country. The decisions should come from these departments, because these departments should have all the heads of the department should be a troubleshooter and a problem solver for that department. They should know all about that department. Unlike, what do they put Pete Buttigieg in transportation? What does he know about the transportation industry? Transportation industry should have people that have worked their whole life in the transportation industry and know the ins and outs of it, not the criminal ins and outs. And that's the whole thing. They, you know, the government thinks they have to make money on the citizenry. That's not what the government should be doing. The citizens have money. And with the breeding of all the citizens, by seeing what is accepted in society, then they create, their children they create. Some want their kids to grow, they all want their kids to grow up and be rich so they don't have to work. The parents are like, well, if my kid grows up and be rich, then, but there's also parents that grow up, they weren't expecting kids. They had kids, and I'd say 1% of the people in this country actually have a good idea of how to raise kids. Because each person is an individual, and you can't just lock them together and say, well, this book says that you're supposed to be doing this, that, and the other at this age, and this, and each person is an individual is going to learn difference, and the parents don't do that. You can look around and you can see where parents are just, there's so many that just, they either don't raise their kids, they just let society raise them, which they end up, being criminals or whatever. Because society, basically humans, the uncontrolled, uncensored thought of humans is basically Satan. Because, and then when that group of thoughts lands on somebody, or that person grows up in society and they get to a certain point, they connect with that uncensored thought and they become it. And there's a power, you ask any entertainer if what they entertain for, and they'll say, well, getting in front of a live audience and feeling the power of the audience, that overcomes them. And they feel, and then they try to push that, they either try to live on that, or they push that feeling back to the people. I don't know how they do. I don't know what they do. But there's life is so convoluted, and they're just making it more complicated and unreasonable, that this population growth is creating burden. And the more, people are being, people get raises because they have kids. People are given tax breaks because they have kids, and they're basically creating burden. The population is a burden to this planet. And if you don't think so, well, why there's so many people starving? Well, they're not working. Well, there's no, what you call work. Well, if you have to clean up somebody else's dog poop because this person doesn't want to clean up their own dog poop, you should have a job cleaning up dog poop. Or human feces, you should be able, human feces, in California, they should create a job. Yeah, and then you're paying taxes for somebody cleaning human feces, where these people shouldn't be, not even going to get into it. But there's so many problems that aren't it's agenda generated politics, and the agenda is such a small percentage of what doesn't, it's such a small percentage of what actually doesn't need to happen. Like pronouns. Why is government making laws about how people are, Mr. or Mrs. or Miss or whatever? It used to be the norm, and now they got all these freaking weird names. And if they're making it so people don't communicate, which the government say, well, the less people communicate, the less groups will have to deal with, and then we'll have no problems, because one person coming forward with a problem, we can dismiss it as one person coming forward with a problem, because they can't communicate with groups, and the groups won't gather together to form a committee or a protest. And so we can dismiss a single person because they won't be able to protest if nobody's communicating with each other. But the ones that are communicating with each other with history, are and they're building criminals up, building statues of criminals, and they're tearing down what they claim to be criminals. You know, it's, you could do a volume of books to fill a library of all the problems and all the reasons and all the different ways that people accept and disagree with everything in life, because everybody has a different opinion. You could get somebody, you get 5 people that they all agree on one subject to a certain point, and then they start dividing, you know, and you take that by 8 billion people, and you get so many different, there's such a small subject that everybody, I mean, when has there been 100% agreement on anything the government has ever done? That's what I think they should work on, where everybody in the country agrees on something needing done. But why do people disagree just to disagree? That's another problem. They might agree with it in their head and in their heart, but they think, you know what? I'm part of this agenda, and I'm going to disagree with whatever this person puts up forward in my face, because that's what my agenda is, and my vote doesn't count. So if I stick with an agenda and do what they want, I'll have meaning. And so what you got is 8 billion people that have yet to agree on anything. I mean, you take it down to what they eat, the air they breathe. You know, some people are like, you know, some people want to breathe in incense. I don't want to breathe in incense. After a while, you know, if you let incense burn and then it burns out, your house smells like freaking urine. I don't know if anybody's ever noticed that before, but a house stinks out. You burn incense and then you smell the house after an incense is burned. It smells horrible. And that's the reason they continue to burn, because it just smells like pee if you quit burning it. So you get addicted to incense, because otherwise it smells like pee, and you think, wow, this house smells like urine. It's not thinking that it's the freaking incense. And so, I mean, it's what you know, they don't even agree on the food they eat. Everybody wants maybe clean water. Everybody on the planet wants clean water. Of course, there's people who say, I'd rather have beer, or I'd rather have whiskey, or I'd rather have fruit juice. You know, because somebody's, maybe they work in or own an industry of fruit juice or liquor or whatever, and they'll say, well, I don't want to drink water, I want to drink my beer. You know, and of course that's all that stuff hydrates. Water is the most important nutrient, so clean water. Maybe the whole planet, maybe every country should say we need clean water, and instead of having individual classifications for each country, the whole planet, every country would have to come up with the same plan and institute it the same way. You can't have one country just putting out a net to catch something when another country is having to build filtration systems. You know, we're going to have to deal with that. I think that clean air and clean water are probably the 2 most important things, because we breathe it, and we have to. That's 2 things that life. But you see them going to these summits, but all they're doing is they post taxes. They just create more problems for people to get a necessity. So this government is not solving a problem. They're just taxing a problem. Yeah, so the more problems you bring up, the more taxes you're going to get thrown in your face, to where they're going to get exactly what they want, is everything taxed, which is what the Revolutionary War was fought for, is to keep government or Britain from taxing everything coming our way. And that's exactly what these people are doing. So they're not Americans. They're no longer American. I'm claiming the government is loyalists. That's what I'm saying, because they have just abandoned our Constitution, abandoned our Bill of Rights. We can just claim that the government is loyalists. That's where I'm going to quit this video and label it.